God, and we're going to start off with the fable of the porcupine. It was the coldest winter ever. Many animals died because of the cold. The porcupines, realizing the situation, decided to group together to keep warm. This way, they covered and protected themselves. But then the quills of each one wounded their closest companions. After a while, they decided to distance themselves from one another, and they began to die, alone and frozen. So they had to make a choice, either accept the quills of their companions or disappear from the earth. Wisely, they decided to go back together. They learned to live with the little wounds that were caused by the close relationship with their companions, in order to receive the heat that came from the others. This way, they were able to survive. So what this tells us is the best relationship is not the one that brings together perfect people, but when each individual learns to live with the imperfections of others and can admire the other person's good qualities. How's that?
Yeah, good story. Great one.
So, prickly. I started a long series that's still going on a while back. We started with working with the law, first of all, and then we had 2 series of the law of attraction, 3 parts to the law of thinking, and 2 parts to the law of sacrifice. Today, I welcome you to this session called the Law of Obedience. It is an interesting lesson, and it is one that's going to cause you to really think inside yourself for a few minutes. Because obedience is an interesting word, and I think probably it's the right word that we want to use here. What we're really talking about is a person entering into physical life, coming onto this planet that we're a part of, and in the body that we're living in. And when you come here, you take a look at what happens in your life. You're living in situations all the time in your life. You're living in a system where everything operates in a very exact way because of these laws. It's easy to understand that if a person hasn't done a respectable amount of studying, they would never understand the laws. And yet, when a person does get an understanding of the law, they have such tremendous respect for it that they just are naturally obedient to the law, which is something that we're learning here for ourselves. And we must be obedient to the law. That's God. That's the principle that's here for us to work. If we're really going to make things happen and grow in our life, we need to pay attention to it. Each one of us has been designed to be a builder in our lives. We're designed with creative faculties, the likes of which you won't find in any other form of life that we're aware of. So, we have a choice, beloveds, every moment of the day. Are we going to build our life in wisdom or in ignorance? Now, according to the understanding of divine law, I see these laws that we're talking about as divine love from our Father, Mother, God to support us. I really believe that the laws as God's uniform and orderly method. It is God's modus operandi for life. Now, many people, when they learn that the science of living is governed by exact laws, immediately assume that the right to live is to live the hard way. They may think, oh man, this is going to be really hard. We've probably all gone through that, or difficult. They're afraid of a law that's exacting in its demand when it touches a relationship with the finer things. And yet, these same people wouldn't be willing that the law which governs human society should be modified in any way. They recognize that the laws which govern our social contact and activity must be properly enforced if organized society is to function harmoniously and safely. In other words, they recognize that the government is for the good of mankind, and that without it, human life and welfare would be in continual jeopardy. Now, if this is true of human government and established by constitution and law, then it's even more true of divine government. And the more exacting the law, the more certainty, the safety, the prosperity, and the happiness of each individual who fulfills these laws on a spiritual level demand. In the realm of science, there are no more exacting than those that govern the science of mathematics. An accountant, even when he fails to immediately to solve a problem, knows that it can be solved by calling into operation the exacting laws that govern all mathematical calculations. When I was writing this out, it reminded me of when I was in high school. I loved accounting. And what we did in accounting was we were given this whole book of stuff for the business that we were going to run for the next year. And I loved it so much at home that I started doing extra work, and I got way ahead of the class. And then where we were at to study, and come to find out that I had the wrong answer. And I'm like, oh my God, how did that happen? And I had to go all the way back at home and find out where I made the mistake and change everything. So it was exacting for me. It told me, no, this is the step you have to do to get this right. So were any of these laws in mathematics subject to change, the solution to our mathematical problems would be utterly hopeless. Now, perhaps in no way has religion gone so far astray as in the conception of our understanding of God, whether it be the God of the Christians or of the heathen or whoever. You all, as you grew up, might believe that the God of your upbringing was not a God that was a friendly God. It wasn't a God that maybe you could relate to. It wasn't a God that you could understand or practice a relationship with, because at that time you didn't, and we didn't understand that it was a relationship with the law of life itself, with the principle of God. That it was a relationship with the law of your own being, because God is inside each and of us. So it's like learning about ourselves more. In fact, for me, I thought later, as in my upbringing, that God needed to attend some sort of anger management class, because it was unreliable God and how it was, what energy came down to us. But that's not at all the understanding that I have now through these laws that I've been learning, that we've been talking about. And that thought matured in my own mind, and I began to realize that just as the universe demonstrates its perfection with the law of the farm, which is if you want to grow a crop, you have to get yourself in harmony and obedience into the law of the farm. You don't try to argue your way out of how nature works with growing a great crop. You get into harmony with it. You learn, what are the steps that I need to do? And you discipline yourself to plant at the right time, to till the soil just right, to clear the weeds, to create an environment that is natural. That which is natural naturally occurs. Tom Wilhide once made a distinction between what is normal and natural. He said, what is normal is the tendency we all have to live in a certain way, with a certain paradigm, in a certain way of experiencing life. But even though it's normal because we repeat it over and over again, doesn't necessarily make it natural. And then he went on to distinguish what is really natural. He said, what is really natural for us is what is in harmony with our own nature. And what is our nature? Unlimited abundance. What is our nature? Unlimited goodness. What is our nature? Unlimited life. And as you and I are in the process of coming to understand all of that and to download it, so to speak, inside ourselves, or to bring it into current time, expressions of our unlimited nature in every aspect of our life, as it shows up in our dreams and our desires, the good that we would like to bring forth into the world, into our own lives. But we cannot do that without an obedience in the practice of the way of being in our own nature. Not to worry about the doing, God takes care of that, but to really connect to who we are being in our life, in our nature. So, while we have a normal way of living, unless it's in harmony with our nature, it's not natural. So I would bet that obedience is a very interesting word for a lot of people. They have, as soon as I said that word, there was judgments or things that came up in regards to it based on how you experienced it in your life. There was a few weeks ago when I talked about the law of sacrifice, it was the same thing. It was like a new way of looking at what sacrifice is about. Now we're looking at a new way of this. I think most people look at obedience as doing something because you're afraid not to do it. Is that true? Anybody got that? Yeah. So whereas in the earlier comments I referred to it as being such profound respect and obedience that controls things in our lives if we look at it positively. That we have something that's there helping us, to support us in creating the lives that we desire. Our societies, our cities, our states, and this whole nation are supported by it. Our properties and our lives are dependent upon it. We must be obedient to the laws that God has put on forth. Because of our respect for obedience, we as a whole support it. But woe unto the person who tries to break through to pillage or plunder for selfish gain. And then it creates problems. For example, as we look in the home, we may see the mother training her child in habits of discipline. Tomorrow, we see a happy mother because her child has grown up into youth and then into adulthood and has earned success. And he is now, or she is a success because back in the beginning of the person's life, the seed of obedience was planted there, which brought forth respect and unselfish thought. It fits much in with I talked with you in the beginning of Living the Law when I talked about Abraham Lincoln, if you remember that, and how he lived his life according to the laws. If the mother was the knowledgeable mother, the mother of understanding, when they're teaching this discipline, they also understand that the child can grasp the wholeness of what they're being taught. Even the child is doing it because of respect, not because of fear. That's not how we want to obey these laws. Business is even founded upon obedience, and so each member obeys the law of commerce if they're going to succeed. It's only when a person expands these laws by over-speculation, by wildcat schemes, inflated values, lack of cooperative agency, which comes from a feeling of lack and not connection to the real laws, then that person puts himself into failures in business that cause bankruptcy and then loss. And how can that work in our own personal life as well? All of the problems of our life are due in some measure to non-obedience to the law of thought and its creator. So our difficulty is knowing what to obey and what not to obey. And the only way to overcome it is to study it, like what I'm giving you now. To take these home and to work with them in your own life. And as was mentioned in one of the earlier talks, freedom is our birthright. And if we're going to be free, we have to study because we want to eliminate any ignorance that we have that's in the way. It's like the statement says, know the truth and the truth shall set you free. And there's only one thing to be set free from, and that is ignorance. We see in nature the answer. She has no problems that she cannot overcome. She has no problems she cannot solve. There are no burdens she cannot bear, no tasks that she cannot perform. Why is that? Because all of Mother Nature's operations are governed by the mighty law of harmony and order, which constantly removes any discord in life, which frees all diseases, which rights every wrong, supplies every need for all of us. For example, in the winter, when a young sprout attempts to break through the soil before its season time, Mother Nature destroys that sprout. And yet at the same time, the very snow and ice that freed that little sprout serves as a blanket of warmth and protection to the other seedlings who are complying with the laws and waiting for the right time. When the individual wishes to use nature in their work, such as farming or gardening, he must know how to comply with nature's laws. In truth, as he obeys her laws, he derives the best results, and in the end will enjoy the best, greatest harvest. So it's that same thing in our life. As we move through and obey these laws, what we manifest, what we harvest, what we create in our lives is a great nature. He who obeys the laws of nature and acts as her obedient servant later becomes the master and reaps a full harvest. It is so true, beloveds. We have to follow and obey nature's way. And when we do, there is a big win in life for all of us. Every student who obeys the law, and you and I are students here learning this, we're students of life. Whether we remember it or not, or whether we're choosing it consciously or not, we're still in this life school. We're still on different grades, learning as we move forward. And all the power and the wonder of being a good student is that life unveils its gifts again and again with no limit. Every student who obeys the law and is a true servant of good, who's disciplined and obedient to the good, will become a greater soul and will reap the power to control every situation in your life, every condition, and every blessing. Think of that, beloveds. It means if you are simply obedient to the law of God, all these laws, if you become a good student of the law and practice it daily, then life unveils everything for you, everything that you want. We not only become a greater soul, we reap the power to control every situation in our life and begin to enjoy every blessing. We become self-masters of our life. We claim our personal power. And there's really nothing that you want more than that. That will help you create the lives that you want. Our mistakes that we do are largely due to the fact that we've obeyed more readily the laws of earth rather than the laws of spirit, or more readily the laws of circumstance. And the things is that we look outside of ourselves for instead of inside. We have subjected our ideas to the outward appearance of things rather than the inner truth that the law teaches or reveals. If we choose to obey the Spirit within rather than the conditions that are about us, that the law requires us to first think these things into existence from within before we see them from without. So as I talked about with the law of thinking, it's always about changing our thoughts, being aware. Where are we at with thinking in our lives? And that's kind of the theme that we have for today. Anybody remember what it is? I forgot myself. Manifesting life through new thought. So we get to manifest life through these new thought principles. And this is truly a shift from when we see that most people who work from the outside in. And the practice of empowerment, the practice of authority, the practice of being able to bring forth the circumstances that you would choose, or I would choose, is to learn to live from the inside out. So instead of waiting for things to change, we change. And over time, things must change themselves. They must match that vibrational harmony that we've now got within ourselves, or compatibility with the frequency that we are living in. Most of our experiences then become the outgrowth of our own creative activities. These created activities are first of all to be bound in the mind, to think about. And the law says, as you think, so shall you reap, which is mathematically adequate and true. There are so many truths that come out in this world that we need to pay attention to. You know, if you plant turnip seeds, nature doesn't produce potatoes, right? If you want corn, it doesn't make a mistake and bring you a giant oak tree or something else. It plants exactly what's put there. Same thing with our thoughts. On the same reasoning, if you or I plant seeds of worry, guess what? The law will obey and will give you something to worry about. They will produce more and more circumstances to fulfill your focus, which is on worry. Or if you think about disease or lack, then guess what? You will increase your receptivity and you will experience more and more of what you're interested in and focused upon. Whatever law you obey will in turn serve you. That's important to know. But the most important thing to know is what to obey and what not to obey. So take those thoughts inside of yourself and reflect on them during this week, and we'll come back and meet for the second half of this talk next Sunday. Namaste. Any comments or questions?